3 months before my wedding, Caleb Rourke sat across from me in our Phoenix apartment and called his affair with my sister a break. The cream envelopes for our invitations were still stacked on the dining table. His half-finished coffee was cooling beside them, and his phone was face down near his knee like it already knew more than I did. He kept rubbing his thumb along the edge of the screen, not looking at my ring, not looking at the menu cards, not looking at the life we had already mailed deposits into. Then he took one careful breath and said Brianna was in a bad place, and he could not abandon her just because everyone expected him to act like nothing was happening. I remember how clean he tried to make it sound. He did not say he wanted my sister, because even Caleb knew that sentence would rot the air the second it left his mouth. He said she needed support. She trusted him. She was fragile after everything she had been through, and I was stronger than both of them. So I would understand. I asked him if he was really asking me to pause our wedding so he could run toward my own sister, and his face tightened before his voice softened into something almost offended. "Don't make it sound ugly, Lydia," he said, like the ugliness had started with my wording and not with his hands, his messages, his secrets, and the woman who shared my last name. That was when I understood the break was not the beginning of anything. It was the cleanup. He had already crossed the line, and now he needed me to stand still long enough for him to redraw it behind him. If I cried, he could call me emotional, and if I fought, he could call himself trapped between two women who needed him. So I sat there, feeling the apartment go quiet around the invitations, and told him if he needed a break, he should take exactly what he was asking for. Caleb exhaled too fast, too relieved, too ready, and that breath told me more than his whole speech ever could. Before that afternoon, the signs had not arrived like thunder. They came in small, ordinary pieces that looked harmless until I laid them beside each other and saw the shape they made. Brianna started texting Caleb after her breakup, first with sad little questions about why men leave, then with messages that came after midnight while his side of the bed glowed blue against the sheets. He would kiss my shoulder, slide out quietly, and whisper from the hallway that she was spiraling again, and I would lie there pretending compassion did not feel exactly like being pushed out of my own life. I wanted to believe him because Diane had already trained me for that part, reminding me that Brianna was sensitive, that I was the steady one. That family did not keep score when somebody was hurting. Then the details stopped being soft. I found Brianna's lip balm in the console of Caleb's car, tucked beside his gas receipts like it belonged there. And when I held it up, he laughed too quickly and said she must have dropped it after he gave her a ride home. A week later, a pink scrunchie sat in his cup holder, and he picked it up before I could, folding it into his fist while telling me I was exhausted from wedding planning. At dinner, he ordered Brianna's exact salad from a Scottsdale place I had never taken him to. No onions, extra dressing on the side, and he looked surprised, only after I asked when he learned her order by heart. The night I saw her name flash across his screen with, "I wish I met you first," he erased the notification so fast his thumb blurred, then looked at me with that calm, practiced face and said she was just emotional. That was the first moment my stomach stopped, making excuses for my heart. A man does not delete a message from his future sister-in-law if the message is innocent. Caleb kept saying support. Diane kept saying patience. And Brianna kept making herself smaller every time I entered a room, as if I had interrupted something sacred instead of something wrong. By the time Caleb finally asked for a break, the word sounded less like a request and more like a receipt he had been waiting to print. Caleb had been gone less than an hour when Diane called, her voice already polished into that careful mother tone she used when she wanted control to sound like concern. She did not ask if I was okay. She told me she and Brianna were close by and thought we should talk before I made anything worse. I was standing beside the dining table with one invitation envelope in my hand, staring at Caleb's name printed beside mine like it still had permission to belong there. By the time I told her this was not a good time, Diane had already breathed. "We will only stay a few minutes. "Honey?" And the line went dead before I could refuse. They arrived with a white pastry box from the bakery near Camelback, the kind Diane bought whenever she wanted a hard conversation to look civilized. Brianna followed her in wearing Caleb's gray hoodie, the sleeves pulled over her hands, her eyes red but too dry to be fresh. And nobody mentioned the hoodie, because mentioning it would have made everyone responsible for what it meant. Diane placed the box on my counter, glanced at the ribbon samples and wedding envelopes, then folded her hands like she had come to fix a seating problem instead of a family rot. "Lydia, we need to keep this from getting uglier than it has to be," she began, and the word uglier landed in my chest because she was not talking about what they had done, only what I might say. Brianna kept looking down while Diane renamed everything in softer language, calling it complicated, then emotional, then a pause. Everyone could survive if I did not humiliate the family. My sister finally lifted her face and murmured, "I'm sorry you're hurt." But she did not apologize for the messages, the late nights, or the fact that she was standing in my apartment wearing the clothes of the man I was supposed to marry. I asked if she was sorry because I was in pain or because she helped cause it, and her mouth tightened before she breathed. "You always make it sound like I'm doing something to you." That was when I understood they had not come to hear me. They had come to hand me my role. So Caleb could be confused. Brianna could be fragile. Diane could be reasonable. And I could stay quiet enough for all of them to look clean. After Diane and Brianna left, the apartment felt staged for a life already canceled. The pastry box sat unopened on the counter. Ribbon samples still spread beside the envelopes, and Caleb's name stared back from every corner like paper could lie with a straight face. I wanted to type one sentence online and tell everyone what he had done, but my hands shook too hard to trust my grief. So I called Morgan Ellis, and when my voice broke halfway through the story, she let me finish before saying, "Do not give them a screenshot of your anger to use against you." Morgan had worked long enough around civil cases to know the difference between truth and proof, and she pulled me back to what I could control. Save everything, keep it neutral, and make every move boring on paper, she reminded me, and the words sounded cold until I opened my laptop and saw the wedding folder. The venue contract was under my email, the resort block under my name, the florist deposit, the photographer schedule, and private dinner menu all tied back to me because I had built the wedding while Caleb built his exit. I did not write a speech. I wrote cancellation notices clean enough to survive being forwarded. Wedding canceled due to private circumstances. Thank you for your understanding. I typed again and again until the sentence stopped shaking inside me. Every reply made the room quieter. Because there was nothing dramatic for Caleb to twist, nothing Diane could call embarrassing, and no broken paragraph for Brianna to cry over. He had asked for a break so the timeline would look clean, and I used that same clean language to remove the wedding he thought would wait for him. When I reached the engagement ring, I photographed it in its box, placed it in my desk drawer, and texted Morgan for advice before touching anything with legal weight. Then I took our engagement photo off the refrigerator and set it face down beside the empty pastry box. I did not tear it. For the first time, the apartment looked less like theirs and more like mine. The next morning, I posted the cleanest announcement I could write. The wedding has been canceled due to private circumstances, and I'm grateful for everyone who has loved us through this season. I typed, then read it 3 times until there was not one sentence Caleb could twist into a public breakdown. I did not name him. I did not name Brianna. And I did not explain the gray hoodie, the deleted message, or the way Diane had tried to make my silence sound like maturity. I pressed post, set my phone face down, and let the room stay quiet. The quiet lasted less than 4 hours. A bridesmaid sent me a screenshot from Brianna's story, and there they were at a rooftop bar in Scottsdale. Caleb half turned toward her, his hand resting at the small of her back like he had not left my apartment with a break still wet on his tongue. Her caption said, "Choosing peace," and somehow that made it worse. because peace had apparently arrived wearing my fiancé's watch and standing close enough to fog the glass between them. I did not reply with rage, because the screenshot had already done what rage would have ruined. By dinner, my messages had changed from gentle concern to careful understanding. One cousin wrote, "I saw enough," and one bridesmaid said, "You don't have to explain anything to me," which made my throat tighten harder than any accusation could have. Diane left a voicemail saying my vague announcement had people asking questions. But Brianna's own post had answered the loudest ones before I ever opened my mouth. When Wesley called, he did not ask if I was sure. He only asked if I was safe. And when I told him I was, he went quiet for a second before saying, "If Caleb wanted to borrow my good name, he can live without it now." I understood exactly what he meant. Because in the resort and event world, some doors do not slam. They simply stop opening. The offer from Santa Fe came 2 days after my wedding website went dark. I was at my desk at the resort, answering a guest complaint about a private dinner that had gone cold, when my regional director called and said the new property in New Mexico needed someone who could handle pressure without turning it into noise. She did not know about Caleb, Brianna, or the pastry box still sitting in my trash at home. She only knew my work. And for the first time that week, being seen for what I had built felt stronger than being pitied for what I had lost. I accepted before fear had time to dress itself as loyalty. Phoenix had started to feel like a room where everyone knew one version of my story, but Santa Fe was a door with no family waiting behind it to tell me how to behave. I notified my landlord, changed my emergency contact, and asked the concierge to remove Caleb from the approved visitor list, with no explanation beyond personal security. Then I packed his remaining things in 2 plain boxes, sent them by courier to the address he provided, and kept the receipt because Morgan's voice was still in my head, reminding me that clean records age better than angry texts. The small endings came faster than the big one. I closed the registry, shut down the shared planning folder, and sent one final neutral note to guests who still needed to know the wedding would not happen. Diane called 3 times that week, and each voicemail sounded less like concern and more like panic over what people were beginning to understand without my help. Brianna posted less after someone at her job screenshotted a petty reply she made from a brand-connected account, and when that reached her manager, it stopped being sister drama and became a workplace problem she could not cry her way out of. I left Phoenix before sunrise with 2 suitcases, 1 garment bag, and the ring still boxed in my desk file. The desert outside the freeway was quiet, pale, and wide enough to make my old life feel smaller with every mile. I was not running from Caleb. I was leaving the version of me who kept staying so everyone else could look clean. Caleb found me in Santa Fe 6 weeks after I left Phoenix, but he did not get past the front desk. The resort had a visitor policy, and my name was no longer something he could use to open doors. The receptionist called my office and said a Caleb Rourke was asking to see me, then paused, like she could hear the history in the silence that followed. I told her the lobby coffee area was fine. Not my office. Not upstairs. Not anywhere he could pretend he still belonged in my private life. He looked smaller when I came down. His shirt was clean but wrinkled at the cuffs. His eyes were tired, and the easy confidence he used to wear around resort people had been replaced by something restless and thin. "Lydia, I just need 5 minutes," he breathed, and I sat across from him because 5 minutes was all that was left of a man I had once planned a future around. He started with Brianna, of course, saying she was vulnerable. She leaned on him too hard, and he got pulled into something he never meant to become. I watched his hands move around the coffee cup and realized he was not confessing. He was rearranging blame. I asked if he came to apologize or just find a softer place to put the story. He flinched, then reached for the old voice, the one that used to make bad behavior sound complicated. "I never stopped loving you, Lydia." Not really. And I almost laughed because love had become his favorite word for damage. he wanted someone else to carry. I told him love was not deleting messages, calling an affair support, then asking for a break so the dates would look cleaner when people started counting backward. Caleb whispered that I was being cold, and I answered that cold was what happened after someone kept putting fire in the same room and calling it warmth. He tried the wedding menu next, then the apartment, then the trip we never took, laying old memories between us like coupons for forgiveness. None of them worked. I told him he did not lose me because of Brianna. He lost me because he believed I would stand still while he rewrote the truth. The final truth came from Morgan. Not as gossip, not as a dramatic reveal, but from a family tablet Diane had asked her to reset before donating. Morgan called from Phoenix with that careful voice people use when the evidence is uglier than the suspicion. And she said a preview from Brianna's synced email was still sitting on the screen. The subject line mentioned keeping me calm. And Morgan did not open everything like a scavenger. She told me to let counsel preserve what was visible, because if Caleb or Brianna ever tried to make me look unstable, the timeline would matter. When the saved thread reached me, I read it twice with my hands flat on the table. Brianna had written that Caleb needed to ask for the break first, because if they were seen together afterward, people would think nothing started until I was already out of the way. Caleb had replied that Diane could handle me, that I always needed to be the bigger person, and that I would never embarrass the family if they framed it as support. That line did not reopen the wound. It ended the last part of me that wondered if any of it had been accidental. I did not post the emails. I stored them through the lawyer, sent Wesley the line about my silence, and sent Diane one sentence with the screenshot attached. You do not need to choose a side anymore. You only need to read what they counted on. Diane did not answer. And for once, her silence did not ask anything from me. Caleb left the Arizona network soon after. Brianna lost the soft victim role she had worn so well. I stayed in Santa Fe, got promoted, and built a life where nobody needed me smaller to feel innocent. Caleb did not disappear with a crash. He faded the way men like him hate most. Quietly, through rooms that stopped inviting him in. The resort accounts he used to brag about became polite maybes, then unanswered emails, then names he no longer mentioned. Wesley never made a speech about it, never dragged him online, never raised his voice. He simply stopped lending Caleb the reputation he had mistaken for his own. Brianna tried to keep wearing the soft version of herself, but softness does not survive when people have seen the planning behind it. The same relatives who once called her sensitive began speaking to her carefully, not cruelly, just differently. Diane still sent messages for a while, mostly around holidays, but every one of them asked for peace without ever naming the people who had broken it. I stopped answering because silence finally belonged to me, not to the version of the family story they wanted protected. Morgan stayed Morgan, sharp and steady, the person who reminded me that proof matters most when your heart is loud. Wesley visited Santa Fe that winter and took photos of the property at sunrise, and when he saw my name on the office door, he smiled like he had been waiting years to see me live without shrinking. I was promoted before spring. I found a smaller apartment with bright morning light, learned the rhythm of a city that did not know my old pain, and later met someone who never made love feel like a test. If this story touched something in your own life, I hope you remember this. Real love does not ask you to stand still while someone edits the truth. Choose the kind of peace that protects you, not the kind that hides them. Share your story below, and subscribe if you want more stories like this.